per transaction with a $10,000 aggregate cycle limit, and our cycles are set at every 15 days or twice a month. And then an enhanced user, somebody that would use it a lot or may use it for fairly sizable transactions, is a $25,000 purchase limit with an aggregate limit of $100,000 per cycle. And then the finance department was declared as kind of being super users in that we could grab anything that we saw during the check writing process and basically flip them from a traditional PO into a card payment. We have a $100,000 purchase limit per transaction with a $500,000 cycle limit. Mm-hmm. And so this we felt was high, but I think part of the reason we've had good success with that is to give them the flexibility that they need to conduct their business.
Okay, Kent, let's talk about now that you have Kelly, are you now with us? Okay, we're going to keep going. We can't get her audio yet. So, Kent, now that you've had experience with your purchasing card from PFM, can you talk about some of the advantages that you found? Perhaps you could talk about data and reporting and controls and transparency and efficiencies. Do you have any comments on how your Treasury department, perhaps your auditing function, reconciles the payment with the audit process, data, reporting, internal controls, and transparency?
Okay. Basically, the way we have it set up is that the cardholder and the departments reconcile their accounts, and they're responsible to assure that all the source documentation is on file and that a supervisor and or a department head has reviewed it and determined it to be legitimate purchasing. That's about the extent of the audit process. We don't then have that paperwork submitted to the auditor's office, who goes through them with a fine-tooth comb. We, in our policy, establish that it's the department's responsibility to assure strict compliance with documentation standards and reconciliation. So we're more of a service center approach, if you will, to move those transactions from their cards into the ERP and ultimately into their budget and spending accounts. And with the issue with regard to the system administration, here is another thing that a takeaway for us that we thought made this a good success. I'm not sure what the staff sizes are in New York cities or communities or villages, whatever the term is, but we have a very small staff. There's about 15 in our whole finance auditors department. There's about 3 of them that focus on accounts payable, and plus 1 supervisor. And at the time we made this transition to PFM, those were the staff people that were administering our card program. And just for the sake of workload and fatigue and adding another toothpick on their task list, we consciously then decided we were going to remove that process of administering the P-Card program out of that accounts payable area, and we put it into our finance staff and gave it to a financial analyst that had skills in moving and manipulating data and basically servicing the program. So part of that was related to workload. If you don't have a program, it may take a little bit of heavy lifting to get it off the ground, but somebody has to be there to support it. So make sure you don't bog down your AP staff and related disbursement cycle people, because they're either going to help you or they're going to hurt you with regard to performance. So we cut them some slack and assigned this to a whole new area.
Okay, so the next on the slides deals with how much spend per year is put on your purchasing card, Kent, and what percentage of that, of total payments, does that represent? And you mentioned early on that you made a commitment to grow the spend to try to maximize your rebate. So how do you see that changing in the future? So let's look at the first question here is how much spend is put on your purchasing card?
Okay, I thought it'd be important to kind of back up the train a little bit and do the analytics of scoping out how much is potential, and PFM can certainly help you with that, I'm assuming. But we look at it, if you just take out your budget and you look at your operations accounts within your total citywide organization, subtract out all the payroll and probably a lot of the capital and all of the debt service, you know, we have about a $250 million budget every year, and I don't have the sheet with me where I did the analytics, but you got to boil it down to what do you think is the vendor population of people that could potentially offer a credit card payment method, and of those, we think we're doing about let's see, I'm thinking it was about 100 million was the potential vendor spend, and we're doing about 38% of that total. No, that's a little high, excuse me. We're spending 17 million on our cards right now, our annual volume, and that started at 0 in 2012. So we have had a rapid escalation up the rebate schedule, if you will. We're at 1.05 under the PFM rebate schedule. Last year we got a check for about $168,000, so it is a sizable payment, and we would like to try to get that to over $200 eventually, or excuse me, $200,000.
Thank you. That's an excellent way of looking at it, and I understand Kelly Smaldone, you're now with us?
I'm going to give it a try, am I?
Yes, you are.
All
so
right.
what we've been doing, Kelly, is we've been walking through with Kent, and
yes,
we're now...
I was able to see the slides and hear everything, just couldn't speak to you.
Okay, good. So what we'll do is we'll just keep going along, okay?
Sounds good.
Okay, so Ken, how do you see the amount that you're spending, the 17 million, out of a potential universe of 100 million? How do you see that changing in the future? What steps are you taking to either encourage vendors that are not on the list to accept MasterCard, or those that are on the list for the city to use the card for that particular vendor? How do you see growing the program? What steps do you take to try to increase the volume?
Well, at this point, we're still looking for vendors. We really had what we believed was a real focused effort right on the inception of the program. Even I was personally involved in polling the vendors and talking to the vendors to see kind of what the acceptance level was. And to kind of put it into a nutshell, the large national companies that may be name brand type companies use it as just a way of doing business. A lot of the other larger regional businesses here in town are happy to take it. But then you start to get into the smaller business environments where they're very apprehensive about paying the credit card fee. So some simply don't take it. And we just spent probably 3 or 4 months hand-holding vendors and trying to identify, and this is the work of the finance department and not the external group, trying to identify who would take the card, getting that information in the form of a report, and then pushing those reports out to the departments to say, we've already checked with the vendors, they gladly will take a card, or if there's stipulations on the limits that they have, we tried to describe that in a report and get that out. We didn't want the dance with the vendors, if you will, to be an excuse that departments would make to say, well, we don't want to call them, or we don't think they're going to take it, or we're not sure if they're upcharging us or not. And we did also ask them to make sure if they did business with a vendor a card business, that they asked them were they being surcharged for the fee or not. So a lot of our work, we believe, was done on the front end, and now we're still growing in volume, but our finance department has backed away from that oversight and that launch, if you will. And the departments that are using it actively are still searching out capability. They may be including it in RFPs or solicitation documents to say, will you take credit cards, yes or no? And if so, what are you going to charge us extra, or will it be at the same fee? So we are taking those steps. We're about 3 years into this program, and unless there's a big, huge change in vendors that do actually accept card payments, we may be slowing the rate of growth in our program because we think we've identified a lot of the main vendors right now.
Ken, that's an excellent suggestion that you had about counties doing bids for whatever it might be for heavy equipment, trucks, large purchases, road salt, and things of that nature to include the acceptance of a credit card, do you, yes, no, and encourage the bids that come in to include that provision. So that's been a very helpful and constructive tip that you've given us. One question that we had on a follow-up here on this one was that has come in, and again, if you have questions, if you're listening, please type the question into your dashboard here and we can address them. One that's come in on this particular subject that we're speaking about here is, did you prioritize the vendors on the vendor scrub list, perhaps that PFM did for you? Did you prioritize the vendors, and did you then prioritize certain departments within the city to encourage them to use the card?
Yeah, that is a very good question. We did get a vendor scrub, and we started from the highest and we worked our way down. And my recollection was, if there's 50 or 60 vendors on the first page of the vendor scrub list, we worked hard on that list to try to identify that because that's where all our volume was. And then as we had time, we kept calling the vendors and working our way through it. And during that process, it takes some time to know whether they're going to take it or not. But because the finance department was very involved in the initial dialogue with the vendors, we had the luxury of, if we saw something come through on our traditional check run that was processed as a normal purchase order, which many people use as a traditional payment method, we literally canceled that transaction and put it on one of the finance department's cards as a way to grow the volume. And then we would call back the departments that said, this transaction was moved to a card, and in the future, would you please use the card? So we felt as though we took a pretty assertive stance on being helpful, but then also being assertive to say, you really do need to use the card. It isn't really even optional because the commission has directed us to grow this program, and we need everybody's cooperation. In regard to that, several departments jumped right on it and were very comfortable right out of the gates, and they used it just as we had hoped they would. There were several others that were very hesitant and even not wanting to budge at all with regard to changing. And the other thing that's difficult about doing this launch is, your corporate culture is whatever it is, and you have to recognize that you're going to get some pushback from people that just don't like change. Or the thing that I've picked up on recently is some of the larger cities, they're fearful of the card program. They have a fear that somebody's going to overspend. They have a fear that there's going to be abuse, and they have just a lot of mistrust in their employee group. We were unique in that we essentially kind of deputized everybody and said, there's no reason there should be a problem with these cards, so let's just hit it hard and see what happens. And I think that was a good move because, if you're fearful, and as a manager or as somebody running the program, and your employees are fearful, nothing's going to happen, or they're going to be not wanting to use it. And in the 3 years that we've done from 0 to 17 million in purchases, we haven't had any trouble with fraud and abuse, so that type of thing. you may, from time to time, have somebody that pulls out the wrong card, and we just call it a declaration of personal use. It was an accident or a mistake. And as long as they declare that right away, we just have them write us a check. And even that level of activity is very small in relationship to our total. So I think if you're thinking about your implementation, I think it's advisable to kind of decide, how do you want to run this and who do you want to empower to try to make it happen? Because somebody needs to lead the process, and somebody needs to kind of lean on the departments that aren't engaging. And I think we serve that role fairly well here. And we have a high level of trust between our departments and our fiscal administration that's been garnered over the years. And so our department managers were very pleased to have this as a tool.
Okay, Kelly, let's go to you for a quick question here. For the folks that are on the line with us here now, can we assume that you have provided a vendor scrub list? In other words, for each of the municipalities that's on the line here, how did you put together the vendor scrub list, and do you prioritize the vendors as to, category 1, 2, and 3, where they would take the purchasing card? How did you do that?
Well, yes, I have actually had MasterCard, because MasterCard is actually the one that processes the county's vendors or the city or the school district, whatever we have on the program. They would supply the vendors that they currently use. So that could be whether they use a regular credit card, whether they're paying by check, it doesn't matter. They give us a list of their vendors. That information goes up to MasterCard in a specific order. So we have, the name of the vendor, the address, the tax ID number if it's supplied, how much they spend per year on the card, with that vendor. And then that gets processed against MasterCard's database. And what we get back is a report that tells us for each county or city, in this case, how much they spend with each vendor, what level of data the vendor supplies, whether it's level 1, 2, or 3 addendum detail. We always suggest that all of our clients target their level 3, 2, and 1 in that order, because level 3s give you the most data, and they actually accept cards the easiest because they're paying the least in fees to accept your card as payment. So if we've already told, on that report, if we come back and say, so-and-so, this vendor takes the card and they're a level 3 merchant, they take the card. They're taking the card from other people, and they will take the card from you. As you get into some of the higher spend amounts, like Kent had mentioned earlier, then it's kind of sometimes they push back a little bit when it's really a big spend. But we've had a lot of success with a lot of entities paying their vendors, even like big dollar items, and they accept the card as payment. Remember that on the vendor side, they get paid within 24 to 48 hours of you using your card. And again, just like Ken said earlier as well, not only can you use it at point of sale up front to the vendors, but you can also use it on the back end as a payment vehicle if someone forgot in another department, and now you have an invoice sitting on your desk, and instead of paying that by check, if you know from your vendor scrub that that merchant accepts card as payment, call them up and give them the card. So, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can do it up front, point of sale, and then on the back end as just a payment vehicle.
Kelly, one of the questions that has come in that we thought we'd present at this point in time is, what about utility companies, energy suppliers, fairly predictable bills being paid by the county for electricity and natural gas, gasoline purchases for our fuel depots. A lot of times these vendors take credit cards. Are these types of companies eligible to be in the purchasing card program?
Yep, if they take the card, and that's like a utility, for instance. Some utilities take the card and some do not. And honestly, you don't even have to say that it's a P-Card. It's a card. It's a MasterCard.
It's just a MasterCard, a credit card.
Exactly. And if they take payment via card, then they will take this card. If they don't, and some utilities don't, unfortunately, then they won't.
So you're also eligible, for those that are listening in on us with here, is your internet, your cable TV, your internet, broadband, and your telephone. In many instances, those providers will accept utilities.
Yes.
Kent, did you want to follow up with something before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I actually have some very interesting case analysis with regard to that. I pushed really hard to try to get the utilities to accept payment, and when we first got going in the program, you know, they're very kind of aloof about limits, and until you really pry and say, well, just how much can I pay on this card? And we are paying our water plant electric bill, our wastewater electric bill, our gas bills, and all of these things. They used to take up to $10,000 per transaction, and so then if the bill was $30,000, we just went onto the website 3 times and paid, you know, $10,000 increments, and then boom, we were done. I think where we rocked the boat a little bit is because they made that so easy. Our first year, we were pushing for additional volume. We actually prepaid our bill for 6 months with the approval of the Finance Committee, because the amount of rebate that we were making by doing that was more than we were making on our cash reserves. But it was short-lived in that I think they caught on to what we were doing, and so then they lowered the limits from $10,000 per transaction to $3,000 and made it a little bit more administratively displeasing to do that strategy. So that, but you need to really keep asking the vendors and any of them, because sometimes we would call the corporate office, you know, if they got a national account, yeah, we gladly accept credit cards. And then when you get out into the hinterlands, into where you live and where you do business, no, we don't take them. And so we would oftentimes cannibalize the transaction with the corporate home office. They would take the payment, and then the local people would get mad at us.
Well,
so
it's proven well with your $100,000 rebate that you have right now, 100,000 plus, that you're obviously doing the right things. Let's go to this next section here, where the question to you is, are there particular types of transactions or payees that you found work well with the purchasing card, and perhaps, again, those that don't?
Yeah, I jotted down a few just from my knowledge and then some discussion with the departments. Our computer and IT purchases, we do a lot of business with online vendors like CDW and some of the other larger hardware vendors. They take payments readily. Like I said about the utilities, we think we're doing as much as we can with the utilities, and in our case, that's electric and gas. And I think we've got cable, but we don't have that much broadband here. The other large area that could be a potential hit for you is your chemicals in your water plant and your wastewater treatment plants. You'd be surprised the level of chemical volumes and the magnitude of the different types of chemicals, and that you're using those each and every day in treating your water and wastewater. So we're doing a fair amount of those. I think you touched earlier on salt for doing our roads in the wintertime. I think that's about $400,000 a year, and our Public Works Department does that. And then even asphalt vendors, where you may be buying asphalt for road construction and related street patching, pothole work and such. So, you know, we've tried to get our employees to reach out to wherever they can, and I think they're doing a very nice job for us.
Well, that again, some excellent suggestions there with the the IT departments, and also the asphalt purchasing and other road construction supplies that happen on a fairly regular basis. Contractors do business all the time with the New York municipalities, and in fact, if they do take a form of credit card payment, that would be something that we should be focusing in on. So some excellent suggestions there. The next section here, we're going to skip slide 8 and go to slide 9, rebates. And you mentioned, I'll have you comment again on how your baseline of what you started with in 2012 and how you grew that rebate to north of $100,000 in present day. And then I'll ask Kelly, following your response, is to go over the rebate program that we have with our purchasing card program. What some counties tell us is the NYSAC purchasing card rebate isn't the highest rebate, but what's not being told is most of the, if not all of the other purchasing card programs cap out or max out purchases to around $7,000 where the rebate would end. And in our case, that is not the case at all. And so by sheer volume, using the NYSAC purchasing card program, it has a greater benefit with the rebate. And Kelly, I'll have you talk about that in a minute. So Ken, let's talk about your rebates, how you started, your baseline, where you are now, and what do you use that rebate for?
Okay, I wanted to roll back to when we had the P-Card program prior to PFM because I think it's relevant to this discussion. We were using a bank-provided system, and I believe at that time we had to hit about a $5 million spend to even qualify for any rebate. So we had this program for, say, almost 10 years or something, and we never got a rebate, zero. So we ran the program. We did about a flat spend of about $2 million a year, mostly on small, insignificant, reoccurring purchases. So we were frustrated as a client, and when we saw the PFM rebate schedule, we thought, this looks really good. We can get a rebate right away. And just to finish the story off, the very first year we betaed, and it kind of started loading in I think June or July, and their anniversary date is in August. We got a $126 rebate in the first month. And I actually took that to our finance committee and said, hey, we're really happy we got a $126 rebate. And they kind of scoffed and laughed at me a little bit. They said, well, why are you bringing it here? I said, well, because in about 3 or 4 years, we're going to bring it to $200,000. And they kind of rolled their eyes a bit. And I said, no, seriously, we think there's potential here. We believe we can change the behavior of the departments and start using this as a tool, and we're going to grow that revenue. So we went from $126 in 2012. In 2013, we had about $88,000 in a check. Then in 2014, last year, we had $164,000 cash check. And in 2015, we may not hit 200,000, but I think we'll be well over 180 with about a $17 million spend. So more than anything, and I honestly haven't compared the rebate schedules of other programs, but I've had several people come in courting us knowing that we were in an active account and that they were flashing larger rebates. I think you just need to know how they're being processed, and we feel that the PFM program gives us dollar-for-dollar coverage and there's no exclusions, whereas others may be nicking you on the high dollar amount transactions. And that's actually where we're making a difference, because our average transaction size is about $620 or so if you divide it out, and I think Kelly's client base, their average is about $360. So we're considerably higher on the ticket level transaction amounts, largely because of our success with paying large items through the program.
And just to add to that a little bit too, is we also see the sheriff's departments and police departments also utilizing these types of cards for their uniforms. every year. So that's, there's so many things that these cards can be used for. And again, it'll just add to the monies that you're spending, and you'll reap the benefits in a rebate at the end of the program year.
So on the schedule now, Kelly, we have in front of the listeners here, we have the rebate schedule up. Can you walk through the rebate schedule here and again emphasize why our program is different than the other bank type programs?
Right. Well, with the rebate schedule that you're seeing here, there's also another thing that we offered last year as well as this year for the program year was an additional 10 basis points if the client spent $200,000 more this year than last year, and last year from the previous year. There it is. And so it'll even add an extra 10 bips to your earnings at the end of the year. Now, all of the ones that started this year, if you spend $200,000 or more, you'll get those extra 10 bips added on to your rebate, which is in the previous slide, the rebate schedule itself. Okay?
Okay, so perhaps you could talk for just a minute here about the rebate schedule that they're looking at right now.
Bill Sullivan, Steve. And for the people on the phone, I just wanted to interject something here because I'm listening to the conversation. My position here is managing director, but responsible for the card program nationally. I think that one of the most important things about the NYSAC program and what Kent has addressed, it isn't the amount of the rebate, it's the help that you get to grow your program to earn a rebate. And to give you a very simple story, and I'll turn it over to Kelly, we met the deputy purchasing manager for City of New York 3 years ago, and he asked us about the card program. And they had gone with Bank of America on the West Coast. They were offered 180 basis points. They have a budget at that time of $68 billion. They spent a total of $13 million on their program and got a lower rebate than our own clients. So I think that one of the things I'd like everybody on the phone to consider is that NYSAC's program, as is the PFM program that we work with Kent and Fargo, our job is to help you grow your program to earn a larger rebate check. The rebate amount is not the important item, it's the amount that you earn at the end of the year. And I'll turn it back over to Kelly.
Thank you, Bill. And yes, we also do not have the other exclusions that Kent alluded to earlier, that we do not ding you on any money spent. So whatever you spend is clearly, you can follow it across this grid. There is absolutely no gray area, and whatever you spent on the left-hand side, you'll know exactly the basis point percentage you'll earn, and on the right-hand side, you'll know exactly what your check will be. It's that simple.
So, Kelly, one of the questions we have that has come in is, how does the municipality receive reporting back from PFM? Is it done monthly, quarterly? How do you communicate their spending and scheduled rebates?
Certainly. It's actually a quarterly email that I send out to each entity, and it'll give you a snapshot of where your program is for the quarter. It'll also give you a run rate out to the end of the year based on your historic spend, what we feel that you're going to earn in a rebate. And then there's also a special little grid at the bottom of that that also tells you if you jump up to the next tier in spend, which we always like to point out, is you might earn an additional, 10 basis points, so it's really a good thing to know where you are, what you're tracking, and how to get up to the next level. And we are here all the time. Any of our clients know that they could reach out to us at any time, off hours, weekends, you name it. We're here to help you grow your program.
Okay, that will conclude the formal presentation here. We do have a few questions that have come in, and one of them is to Kelly, is fraud and misuse. Can you discuss the insurance, if you will, on the card for potential misuse?
Absolutely. So if you have 5 cards or more, you're covered under master coverage for $100,000 misuse insurance per cardholder per incident. So if I had a card with the county and I got a little crafty and went out and used my card and bought, 5 flat screen TVs for my house, and I can't pay the county back, you would terminate my employment. And we also had MasterCard, except that in New York State, it could take some time to do that, to terminate an employee. So they know that it could take up to a year to actually terminate someone. You will get your money back. Now, of course, if somebody uses the card on accident and, they really didn't mean to use that card, but they pay you back, well, obviously you're not going to terminate them. It was a mistake. So that's different. But on misuse, true misuse, if I got crafty with my card and used it and couldn't pay the county back, you get that money back as long as you terminate me. And fraud, you have zero liability for lost or stolen card information. That's the bank's responsibility. They pay it. They eat the charges.
Okay, I've got one last question. I'm going to turn it over to Mark Levine. He's got several that he has got off of the questions from the audience here. The last one that I have here is automobile purchases. The counties buy trucks, the counties buy automobiles, cars, for various departments, sheriff's vehicles, road patrol, directly through Ford or dealerships, and also through enterprise fleet management programs where we're renting cars on a monthly basis. Are those purchases qualified for this program?
Well, yes, the rentals especially, because we do here at PFM, we travel all the time and rent cars and stay in hotels and travel, so absolutely, they would accept the card as payment. And then when it comes to physically purchasing one from a dealership, it all depends on them. If they accept card as payment, then you certainly can pay for a vehicle. Yeah, there might be a limit on it. Again, it's every vendor is different, but we have had some entities buy vehicles. John Deere equipment, all kinds of things like that you can certainly put on the card. So there are so many vendors. And just so you know, we also have a master vendor listing that we had emailed out to all of our clients around January of this year. So if you did not receive a copy of it, please let me know, and I will send you that master listing. And even though we really didn't have a good, footprint in New York State yet, it has all of the states that we have. I'm certain that a lot of the vendors that you see on another tab for another state would be a vendor that you would purchase from. It's just chunked up by state within the report. It's a 7 megabyte file. So, it could have been like kind of bumped out by your firewall. So just let me know if you did not receive it, and I'll send that out as well. So
hey,
you'll have
Kelly,
a master listing. Yes.
Kelly, it's Mark. Can you resend that to all of our members, all of our participants, regardless here at the end of this?
Sure. Sure.
One comment that we do have is, in addition to that, what you're sending out to everyone this afternoon, St. Lawrence County has found that many of the bids from national cooperatives require vendors to take P-Cards. So in addition to the master list that Kelly's going to send out, if you participate in a national cooperative, those vendors all take P-Cards as well.
That is true, Mark. Thank you for pointing that out. U.S. Communities is also another one. I don't know if anybody deals with U.S. Communities for your, cooperative purchasing, but they take card as well. So there's a lot of people that take card.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left and a few questions. One is a follow-up on the card misuse. Kent, you have 300 cards out there in the city of Fargo. Who polices that to make sure that if I was a card holder, I wasn't buying 5 televisions on that card?
Well, as a part of our internal control process is to have the department head validate and review the packets of information and literally sign off to say they've looked at them. And I think they use various techniques to review. But I mean, in the end, if something blows up and somebody misappropriates funds, it's going to be a nick on the mark of the department head overseeing the card holder. So in other words, we've shifted that responsibility out of the finance office and into the departments.
Okay, great. Thank you. If you have, or if a county has a construction or capital project, have you in Fargo had a construction project in which you have, found it helpful to build the spend on the card? Is there a way or tips that you can give our counties who may be building a jail or have a large courthouse or any other construction or capital project? How can they use the card to increase spend and get a rebate?
A couple of things come to mind as I think about that. We have a very robust construction activity here. It's maybe 100 to 150 projects a year at least, but the primary contractors typically don't take them due to the size of the payments, but the supporting organizations like your materials testing, your quality testing, some engineering firms, geotech analysis when they do earth testing and such, oftentimes they will take cards. So if it says they'll take a card, we certainly will pay it via card. And there aren't that many in relationship to the amount of construction contractors we do business with, but they can be sizable in scope.
Mm-hmm. And also, just to elaborate on that as well, is you could also use what's called a budget card account, which is a fixed line of credit that gets depleted as you use it. So let's say you had a $500,000 construction deal that you needed to do for this new building, okay? You would put $500,000 on that card, but unlike a prepaid card, you do not pay the $500,000 up front. You only pay as it gets depleted. So if you only paid for $10,000 worth of sheetrock, screws, concrete, things like that toward that budget card project, you would only pay $10,000 towards your bill at the end of the month. And the credit line does not replenish automatically, because it wouldn't be much of a budget card, would it, if it automatically replenished. But you could put more money on the card if you needed to.
One last question. How do you incentivize departments, or do you incentivize or recognize departments or employees for using the card? Ken.
Yes, that is a good question. We haven't got into a formal process of recognition at this point. We do a top 20 report, and we distribute that around to the departments. Sometimes it can be almost a competition amongst employees to try to get on the top 20 list that says they're really using the card and they're generating a lot of business volume. I would like to take it to this year when we break potentially 200,000 or somewhere more than last year. When we present that check to the City Commission, I'm thinking about bringing the top, just say for the top 10 card holders that did a lot of the volume, and just recognize them publicly, because there's a lot of cooperation and there's a lot of work to transition into this program, and they deserve as much credit as anybody because they're continuing to use that method.
And I also, just to add to that, I also think that the recognition should really be to Kent for his program, for taking control of it and doing what he has done to make it successful and really, move it forward.
Yeah, and I wanted to comment on that, Kelly. Thank you for that comment too, by the way. One of the things, as somebody, I was personally involved in the deployment, you have to anticipate what a lot of these departmental excuses would be for not wanting to use the card, and try to take away as many of those concerns early on you know, with the vendor scrub, pre-approving the vendors, telling them they'll take it, being available to answer their questions, and just trying to anticipate that. And the other thing I want to leave you with is you should really try to establish a rebate goal. And when Bill and Kelly walked into here in 2012 and said, we'll have you spending $20 million in about 2 years, I scoffed at them and laughed, because we had only been doing about $2 million a year, so that's 10 times the money. And I'm happy to say that I can see that goal materializing at least within the next couple of years. But we've had to be assertive, and we've set our goals. We've also used the fact that the City Commission endorsed the program and the goal, because when we asked for an approval, we said, we want you to endorse the program, and we also want you to endorse the goal, because by endorsing the goal, it takes the monkey off of my back to say, we're the implementing department, and if they start making noise or not wanting to cooperate, you say, well, the City Commission has told us to do this and be successful and get this amount of rebate. So your failure to cooperate is not an option, and it's not a threat. It's just being communicative about what we expect.
Kent, this is Mark Levine at NYSAC. We thank you very much for your time. We congratulate you on your success in this program. Kelly, we appreciate your time today and all the time that you've spent with our counties who are participating in the NYSAC PFM purchasing card program. At this point, we have no more questions. We thank all the counties on the phone and appreciate your time this afternoon. If you should have any questions at all, please contact Kelly Smaldone. Her contact information is on your screen right now. I thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thanks.